So good morning, everybody. And good morning to all of you here and to those who are following on the internet, either through the streaming now or sometimes in the future. We are going to wrestle for the next few minutes through what it means to be a blessing to a community, to the local community. And I want you to focus on a passage that meant a lot to me in the recent times. We will ultimately go into John 21, but we need to start in John 20 that we have heard in the scripture reading by Gabriel. As you know, there are 4 stories of the life of Jesus: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John was written the last, and Mark was written the first. So here we deal with the last story, the Gospel of Jesus. Okay, we need to start from verse 1. Yes. So open your, yes, there we are, thank you very much. Open your Bibles or switch on your holy devices or just follow the screen. But I want you to see the text. You need to have it in front of your eyes. You remember 8 times more. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved. And we need to stop here. So we are learning that Mary came to Simon Peter because she has discovered something she did not expect at the tomb. And so she comes to Simon Peter and the other disciple. Which is the other disciple? Oh, okay, you say John, yeah, right. The one that Jesus loved. Now you need to know that it was popular in that time that you don't identify yourself. I remember when I came to Newbold in 1981, when we were writing papers for the lectures, we would write, in this paper we are going to do this and that. It was very impolite to say, I intend to do this. You don't do that. You say, we will do this. Remember in 80s, Margaret Thatcher got herself into trouble when she said, we became grandparents. In that culture, it was inappropriate for her to refer to herself as we. Nowadays, when you write papers at the university, you write I. Because it's your paper, you don't write we. So culture changes, and in those days, you don't refer, it's impolite to say, I, John. So you find a way, a phrase that describes you. And therefore, through the Gospel of John, the words or the phrase that describes John, he will refer to himself as the disciple that Jesus loved. Which, of course, if you are Peter, then it's a little bit of a right hook. That's why you understand this gospel was written the last. People need to die first before you can refer to yourself. And by the way, I am the disciple that Jesus loved. Is it clear to everybody? Yeah. And Mary said, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. Guys, we have a case of a missing Savior. This is an emergency. We need to do something about it. Can we move it? So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. So what happens next? Peter and John started running for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter. So both Peter and John are running towards the tomb, and then we learn that John outran Peter. Now that's very important. You guys need to know I was faster than the first pope. Okay? And then he says, because when you outrun someone else, No, we still need to go back. The other disciple outran Peter. Now, when you outrun someone, you usually come second. Because he says, and reach the tomb first. Now, we know that, John, you just said to us that you outrun Peter. And when you outrun someone else, you usually come first. But he still needs to add, and by the way, not only I outrun Peter, but I reach the tomb first. Then he bent over and looked into the strips of linen lying there, but he did not go in. You can see the mentality of John. He's a meditative person. Wow, this is overwhelming. This is not supposed to be like this. So he stops and he needs to process things. But then Simon Peter came along. How did he come if he outran him? Behind him, of course, just remember that. He went behind him and he went straight into the tomb because he's a choleric person. So he needs to go into that. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. This is what he saw there. Finally, the other disciple which is the other disciple, by the way? By now you have forgotten, so let me remind you, he's the one who reached the tomb first. Remember, I beat the first pope on the final camera. He also went inside. And what was important? He saw and believed. Not just like Peter, who apostate did not believe immediately, but let me tell you, not only I outran him, not only I was faster, but not only Jesus loved me, but I was the first who believed. Are we clear on the text for today? So, here we are. In an important moment of human history. And so John wants you to know that the tomb is empty and everything is changed now. We are in new era. God's promises have come true. The death was defeated. The curse from the Garden of Eden is reversed. The devil is defeated. Everything is new. And by the way, I am a faster runner than Peter. So side by side, here we have this monumental moment of human history when Jesus defeated the devil, delivered the crushing blow to the serpent from the Garden of Eden, from Genesis 3. The world will never be the same again. And here you read not only the account of resurrection of Jesus, but also a story of two people with their strange, petty rivalry. Who is a faster runner? Who is a person of more faith? And who is the one whom Jesus loved more? Isn't that strange? Like small boys in a sandpit. And here it is in the Holy Gospels. Now we can go to John 21. You know that this is the last chapter, to see if John is the only one who suffers from this. Chapter 21 of John is the last chapter of his account. Previously we have learned that Peter was the one who denied Jesus. When Jesus, before he was crucified, people asked him, "Are you the one who has been with Jesus as well? Are you one of his disciples?" And Peter says, "No, I don't know this man. I never heard of him. I have no idea what you are talking about." So 3 times Peter denies Jesus. Now picture the Sea of Galilee, somewhere on a beach. Jesus and his disciples meet for one of their last encounters. And of course, this is picking up from John 21, verse 15. Jesus is going to talk to Peter first. When they finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. Take care of my people. Peter, I still count on you. Peter, I still believe in you." Again, Jesus said, verse 16, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep. I still have a job for you. After all this that happened, after all that monumental failure, I still have something for you." Then the third time, verse 17, he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" But he said, "You know, Lord, all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus replied, "Feed my sheep." Peter, I have still a ministry. I have a calling for you. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you, and someone else will lead you where you don't want to go. What is he talking about? Is he talking about a young man getting married? Is he talking about someone in a care home? No, verse 19, Jesus said this was to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then he said to him, "You follow me." And Peter turned and saw the other disciple. Which disciple? Whom Jesus loved, following them. This is the one that was leaning back against Jesus at the supper and said, "Lord, who is the one going to betray you?" And when everybody was confused, because Jesus said, "Guys, I need to tell you something I have known for the last 3 years, but I was putting off telling you. One of you is going to betray me by the time this night is finished. I cannot put it off any longer. I need to tell you, I have known this, but now you need to know it too." And everybody said, "Oh, wow." But they had no clue who that might be. Imagine Jesus treated Judas in such a way that the disciples had no clue who that might be. But then it was John who found out from Jesus who was that person. So you need to know that. When Peter saw him, he asked, "Lord, but what about him?" And Jesus answered, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." Jesus says, "You follow me." And because of this, the rumor spread among the believers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you?" Aren't you glad that now we live in a different era, that in those days people would take the words of Jesus and give a clear meaning to an ambiguous statement and thus twist it out of the original context, that we don't struggle with this anymore? Aren't you glad? Jesus says to Peter, "It's none of your business." So it's not only John who struggles with this, it's also Peter. And Peter says, "Lord, I am glad you told me something about my future, but what about the other guy?" Now, the early church fathers gathered a document which tells us about the death of Peter, how John and Peter actually died. It affirms that John was thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil, but he did not die, he survived. And after that, he was banished on an isle of Patmos. There he wrote the book of Revelation. He was the only apostle who escaped a violent death and did not die as a martyr, but died of natural causes. He was over 80 years old when he received the book of Revelation, and then he returned back to Ephesus, delivered it, and died there. And we also know that Peter was crucified, but when it came to the crucifixion, he requested that he is not worthy to be crucified as Jesus was, and so he was crucified upside down, with his head down and his feet up. We know this from the church history. So Jesus is talking to Peter about his death, saying, Peter, I still have a job for you. I still count on you. But there is a future for you that you might not enjoy, but still it's something that's going to glorify me. And Peter's response when he receives this calling, this mission, this vocation, a life to live for is, what about him? And what about the other guy? What do you have for him? Now, here is the thing. You cannot be a blessing to a community unless you are clear on who you are. If we all struggle with the idea, who am I? Why am I here? What is my task? What is my purpose in this world, in this life? If you have not figured that out, you are going to be concerned about yourself and not about the community around you. You are not going to be concerned about other people. Or you are going to see what you don't have and they have, or you are going to see what you have and they don't and say, serves them well, but you are not going to be concerned about other people around you. And that's why this is so important, that in these monumental times when we speak about the consequences of the resurrection of Jesus for the whole world, we have these strange dynamics going on between Peter and John and Peter, where they struggle with, and who am I? Where is my value? And it's not only they who struggle with this, it's not only you and me. Let me give you two more biblical examples. If you go to Genesis chapter 27, then it starts with verse 18. It's a story of Jacob. Jacob has a twin brother named Esau. Esau becomes a powerful and skillful hunter. He is marginally an older brother. And Jacob is the younger brother, but he wants the blessing of the older brother. And he wants it so much that he is willing to deceive his father, and so he decides, at the advice of his mother, to put on a bunch of animal skins because his father is losing his sight and his senses. And so Jacob dressed up like his brother, his older brother, and then we'll pick up the story in verse 18. So Jacob went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," Isaac answered. "Who is this?" And listen to this. Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn." In Jewish storytelling, there is something very specific. The first words somebody speaks are always very significant. And what are the first words? "Who are you? Who are you, my son?" And Jacob said, "I am Esau." When we meet Jacob, he pretends to be someone else. He does not feel comfortable being Jacob. He wants to be Esau. And of course, the father is concerned. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. And Jacob replied, "I am." This is important for our understanding of story. When we meet Jacob, he wishes to be somebody else. He's pretending. He's acting like he's Esau. He even gives another name to trick his father. Can you relate to this? How often we are not happy with how we are born. How often we wish we were taller and thinner and stronger, or from a different family. Maybe one of the central struggles with what it means to be human is to struggle with, are you comfortable in your own skin? We wish we were somebody else. God, why didn't you give me this or that? Why did you create me this way? Why I was not born into that family? Why do I have to go through this experience in my life? For all of us, there is a struggle with being who God made us to be. And we struggle with God, we struggle in our relationships, because you cannot be at peace with others unless you are at peace with yourself, with who you are. If you secretly wish that you were another person, if you secretly wish you had somebody else's capacity, skin, money, spouse, car, house, you name it, you are not going to be a blessing to somebody else. And this is Jacob's struggle, as he struggles with God and struggles with people. He needs to come into terms with the fact that he is not Esau. Jacob is Jacob. If you fast forward to Genesis 32, starting from verse 24, we are going to see what happens 20 years later. 20 years later, Jacob is now heading back to reconcile with his family across the river, but he's scared to meet his brother. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. As he's coming back, and when the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched, and he wrestled as he wrestled with the man. And verse 26, then the man said, let me go, for it's daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Remember what was it that he was after with his struggle with his brother? Father's blessing. And now again he realizes that this strange man who was fighting with him the whole night was not his enemy as he originally thought, because if he was his enemy, he would have hurt him. But he was not able, he did not harm him, he did not hurt him. So he must not be his enemy. So Jacob clings to him and says, I want your blessing. And listen to this. The man asked him, what is your name? Have you heard this before? Yes. That was in Genesis chapter 27, 5 chapters back. What was the thing that Isaac asked of Jacob? What is your name? And notice the answer. What is your name? Jacob, he answered. What was the thing that he answered the first time? I am Esau. Now, 20 years later, he is comfortable in his own skin, and he answered the same question, different answer. I am Jacob. To which the man replies, and listen to this. And the man said, now when you are comfortable with being Jacob, your name is no longer going to be Jacob. Your name is going to be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with other human beings successfully and overcome. Now, when you are comfortable being Jacob, I can use you to be a blessing to somebody else. Because remember, why did God call Abraham? So that through you, all the families, all the clans, all the tribes of the world will be blessed. Now, when you are comfortable being with who you are going to be Israel. You are going to be a blessing to the community and beyond. The interesting thing is, it's not only individuals who struggle with this, like Jacob and Peter and John. It's also groups of people. It's also churches, it's schools, it's ministries, it's communities who struggle with this. So, if we turn to, let me give you one more biblical example. 1 Samuel chapter 8. 1 Samuel chapter 8, you can see that all the leaders of Israel gathered to Samuel, to Ramah, and they said to him, 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 4 and 5, they said to him, Now you are old, and your sons do not follow your ways, and therefore appoint a king to lead us. Why? Such as all the other nations have. Here's a group of people who come to Samuel and say, you know, we want to be like other nations around us. We are not comfortable being who we are. We want to be like those around us. We want to be like other nations. Why? Oh, because if we don't have the king, we are very different, and we don't want to be different. To which Samuel replies and told these words to the Lord. He feels that as a rejection of him and his ministry. So he told the words of people to the Lord. And the Lord said to him, this is what the king will do. He will reign over you, and he will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. And some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and others to plough his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. And God says this is not a good idea, because this arrangement means that the next leader is not going to be the most charismatic person who is sensitive to the guidance of the Lord, because God always chose the judges. The next leader is going to be the oldest son of the preceding king. And besides, nothing is going to be good enough for the king. He will take the best sons to fight in his army, the best girls to be in his harem. He's going to need a huge administration, and people will work for him, and he's going to fight the wars, and you will be the pawns in his hand. This is what is going to happen. Listen to this. If you are not true to your unique calling, and you get what you want just because your neighbors have it, that will actually be your downfall. It's not going to be a blessing for you. When the Israelites say, we want to be like other nations, give us a king, they get what they want. Which one did they want? A tall one, so they get a tall one. And that the Bible says, and it didn't work out well. And not only that, after Saul comes David, and after David comes Solomon. And what do we read in 1 Kings 9? 1 Kings 9, verse 22. That Solomon was very kind because he did not make slaves of the Israelites. He only made slaves of other nations. But the Israelites were his fighting men, his soldiers, his government officials, his officers, his captains, and the commandments of his chariots and charioteers. Have you heard these words before? That's exactly what Samuel says in 1 Samuel 8. This is going to happen. These are the words of the Lord predicting, if you don't accept your position, if you are not happy with who you are, this is going to be your downfall. And sure enough, after Solomon, the kingdom is split, the kingdom is divided, and soon it's destroyed when the whole north kingdom goes into captivity, into a foreign land. Until today, we don't know where those 10 tribes are. The whole empire falls because people are unwilling to step into their unique calling, the unique role that God has for them. They just insist, we want to be like everybody around us. They get what they want, but it ends up being their destruction. The whole empire crumbles down, and you can trace it back to a group of people who are not comfortable in their own skin, who say, we want to be like our neighbors around us. And that's why the answer of Jesus to this mentality, to this type of thinking is what? What is that to you? That's what he says to Peter. This is none of your business. When he asked, and what about him? He answered the question with another question. What is that to you? If you go into the 10 Commandments in Exodus 10, the first 9 are commandments which are externally observable. If you murder someone, it's obvious because somebody is dead. It's not there. It's not alive anymore. If you steal something, something is missing somewhere. If you make a graven image and bow down to it, it's observable. If you are not respectful to your parents, it's something that everybody else can see and observe. But then comes to commandment number 10, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, or his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Or in another translation, you shall not envy your neighbor. You see, this commandment is something that goes on inside. I might be talking to you right now, preaching a sermon, but deep down in my heart, I may be coveting or envying somebody else's property, somebody else's whatever. And it's interesting that when the rabbis made their commentary on the commandments, they say the 10 Commandments is a reward for those who obey the first 9 God's commandments. If you live true to how God created you to be, then you don't need somebody else's life, somebody else's house, ox and donkey, furniture and cars and this and these and that things. You are happy in your own skin. You are happy who you are. And the last text, in Job chapter 5, it says, the resentment kills a fool, and envy slays the simple. This is a classical example of Hebrew parallelism. In Hebrew poetry, you say the same sentence with different words. The resentment kills a fool. What is resentment? It's the same thing as envy. And who is the fool? He's the simple guy. If you are resentful of your life, of what you have, if you crave things that you don't have, if you envy those around you things they have, ultimately it's going to kill you. Now, it might not kill you physically, but it's going to kill every joy inside of you. It's going to kill your spirituality. It's going to kill your usefulness for the community, for people around you. If you are not reflecting, why is it that in my life I feel this resentment that other people have what I don't have? Why is it that I envy these people, what they've got? If you don't deal with it, if you don't reflect with it, if you live a life which is not reflective of what's going on in your life, ultimately it's going to catch up with you, it's going to kill you. When you compare yourself with others, you lose joy. We rob ourselves of immeasurable joy when we compare ourselves, what we know about ourselves, because you know what's going on in your life, with what you don't know about somebody else's life. What you see is what they have, but you have no clue what they go through, how happy they are, or how unhappy they are. And so here's the problem. You compare what you know about yourself with what you don't know about somebody else. You only see what you see, but the reality is bigger and deeper than what you see. And this is going to rob you of joy. And Jesus says, you have life. And your life is not her life, and her life is not his life. You have life which is unique yours. You have gifts that you can contribute to the community and the blessing of people around you, which are unique. One more. You have a mission, not only life, you have a mission. Your mission might not be as his mission or her mission. You have a responsibility in life, and your responsibility is not her responsibility, and her responsibility is not your responsibility. Because if you keep comparing yourself with others, there will always be someone who is smarter than you, There will always be someone who is more talented than you. There is always someone who has more money with you. And if your happiness depends on what you have or you don't have, you are never going to be happy. And so here's the lesson. Next time when you are tempted to ask, but what about them? How come they've got this and I don't have it? Remember, Jesus is saying to you the same thing he said to Peter. What is that to you? That's none of your business. I have given you your gifts. I have given you your influence. I have given you your responsibility. I have given you your mission. And you can be a blessing to someone else with what you've got. You can be a blessing to a community. You can be a blessing to someone else. Remember, happiness is not achieved by chasing for happiness. Happiness is a byproduct of service. When you see what you've got and serve with that to other people, you are going to be happy. Can we? Jesus says, I didn't call you to be her, and I didn't call him to be you. Following Jesus means that he wants to rescue us from the ways that prevent us from being the people he made us to be. Following Jesus means that he wants to rescue us from the thinking that it's our past that defines us, that defines our present or the future. He can create a new future as long as we are not bound by our past. Jesus wants to free us, save us from our greed, from our envy, from our covetousness. He wants to save us from being bored or from lack of imagination, how he can use us. Because Jesus, he says, saying to every one of us, you follow me. And if Jesus is a community like that, just imagine what kind of blessing that would be for the local community.
Amen.